Now, I've been asked on to speak, and we've done a couple of these Zoom meetings in the past, and I love doing them. They're not quite the same as the in-person open houses, but at the same time, they serve the same purpose. They give me an opportunity to reach out to y'all and give you a perspective of what we're seeing. And in a way, it can be a refresher, especially for the newer associates and newer members who haven't had the plan very long and maybe don't even know who I am or know who we are. I can better explain, and I'll be doing some of that today. So if you or if you're an experienced associate and you find yourself zoning out because I'm talking about something you've heard before, don't worry about it. Grab a sip of coffee. You're not going to hurt my feelings. But I'm also going to be sprinkling in during my talk examples of things that we're seeing, so that way you can have a better understanding of when people approach you and say, well, I'm experiencing this problem, or what trends are, if you ask me, what trends are you as the law firm seeing, both good and bad, and quite frankly, what trends I anticipate might be happening in the future. This is stuff that we need to get squared away, so that going forward, because with this, if there's one thing, that this has been a crazy year for all of us, but it's definitely been a crazy year for us as a provider firm. The from the beginning of the year to when all this was a vague kind of joke over in China, this weird rumor of, oh, I hear they have some kind of virus going on over there, to the shutdown, to the opening, to the re-shutdown, to and now kind of to the new normal, where we're still just kind of figuring this all out. And our legal trends and our usage have changed significantly in certain ways as a result of this pandemic. Um, and I'll be going over all that with you. And I'm going to kind of start a little bit by just kind of going over some of the very basics. First of all, if you're on this call and you don't know me or never met me before, which there may be some of you haven't, my name, like you said, like Daniel said, my name is Brian Ross, and I'm a co-managing attorney with Ross and Matthews. And we've been the provider firm for Legal Shield, or prepaid back in the days before it was called, they changed to Legal Shield, since 1990. And we've been doing this. We just came up on our 30th anniversary. And we've been doing this a very long time. However, our traditional way of doing it to a certain extent has been upended by the pandemic. Now, for those of you who haven't been to our office, we are, once the pandemic went, we are virtual, and we've remained virtual with a handful of exceptions. We decided to do this because what we were worried about is, even though we have a very large office space with a lot of room for social distancing, especially if you've been on one of our open houses, because once we went paperless about 5 or 6 years ago, we had a vast amount of space open up. So we could be socially distanced and we could bring everybody back to the office. But what concerns us is if one person comes in and they test positive, and we've seen this in other businesses and other practices, they've had to shut everything down. And the one thing we didn't want to risk is get our employees getting sick. So what we've done is if we have almost a 95% hybridization of virtual work. We do have a handful of people at the office, and our doors are open. So if you need to come in and have a traffic ticket dropped off, or drop some documents off, or pick something up, or let's say you have you wanted your will executed, and you want that done. To the best of my knowledge, we're still doing the wills in person, although we're sending them via email, which I'll get to in a little bit. But our doors are still technically open, but we have minimal staffing physically present at the office. We have a handful of people whose job it is to sort the actual mail we get, the snail mail that we get, all the documents that we receive, the will questionnaires, the tickets that we still receive via mail. We're still processing those. And we still have a handful of our older attorneys upstairs who just flat out refuse to work from home. We've had a handful of those that in the beginning we couldn't use their services, and we've slowly brought them back once we were able to get them spaced out. But there's only a handful of those. The vast majority of our staff and our people and our departments are working offline from home. And that has posed a set of challenges that we're getting better at, but we're still working on. And I've discovered it's kind of strange because for me, you know, whenever there's something going on at the office pre-pandemic, if there was something going on at the office, I could fire off a chain of emails and I could address these people and I could address these people. But I found that it was actually easier for me to just get up and just walk upstairs, go over to somebody's office, sit down and talk with them and say, hey, what's going on? We need these documents, or where's this will questionnaire? These members need it. They have a question. It was a lot easier for me at least to do in person. But not all of our folks are that way. Some of them are just they're working better from home than they did in person, probably because they're less distracted. But it's been a change and it's been a shift in how we do things. But the nature of the plan remains unchanged, and what we do for the most part remains unchanged, with a handful of exceptions. Our consultations, if you're new to the plan, I want to share something with you. I got asked this question a while back from a member, and I've given this example before to a handful of you, but I was asked a while back from a member, well, what is the value of a consultation? If you were to put a money value to it, what would you put that as? And that's a hard question to answer because attorneys have a very broad range in determining what their billing rates are. But just to give you an example, there's a firm in Dallas, the Ahmed firm, very good firm, real good lawyers. They do great work. But months ago, walking by their office, or actually Big Ross was walking by their office, and he on his way to a speaking event, and he snapped this picture because they had a note posted on their door. This is obviously pre-pandemic. Effective immediately. Please be advised our firm offers free consultations. Many firms do. Well, not many, some firms do. However, this applies to the first 20 minutes. After the 20 minutes, there will be a $75 fee for an additional 10 minutes up to 30 minutes. And thereafter, it will be a $150 fee for each additional 30 minutes. Now, what you have to understand if you're new to this, and if you've been around for a while, you may have heard me explain this before. Attorneys' time is their time is their money. And if I offer a free consultation, I'm on law offices of Brian Ross, odds are I'm a litigator. I'm a personal injury attorney. And the reason that I'm offering you a free consultation is because I want to get you in my door. I want to see if your case is worth my time and trouble to take. And the only way that I'm going to get you in my door instead of going down the street to somebody else is if I offer a free consultation. Because if that other attorney bills you, like this one ostensibly does, minus their first 30 minutes, then you may go to that attorney instead of me. So he offers a free consultation for up to, what did I say, 30 minutes, I believe? 20 minutes. That is just long enough for those attorneys to figure out whether or not your case is worth taking. And that's not if you have a question, a general legal question, if your neighbor's dog is barking, or if you have a landlord who wants to come in to your apartment while you're having your kid's birthday party because he's demanding to show the property off or fix a pipe. There's all those basic day-to-day legal questions that people have. That's not something that's covered under normal attorney time. However, that's what we handle, and we handle over 1,000 calls a day for those types of matters. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit as far as usage goes, because we've had some trends that I need to share with you. But the free consultation benefit is incredibly invaluable now because one of my colleagues, Ben Farrow, said this a few weeks back in one of his speeches, because we listen in sometimes on each other. And I got a lot out of this. He said, you don't want your legal situation to become your legal problem, or you don't want your legal question to become your legal problem. And if you have this plan, it's going to make it easier to navigate through your day-to-day life in terms of what's going on and how to anticipate future problems, which I'm going to get to in a little bit as far as what I think future problems are going to be for a lot of members, or at least some members, unfortunately. We are seeing a significant increase in, or a back to normal increase in document reviews and demand letters, which makes sense because as life is getting back to the new normal, as people are getting out and going back to their lives, they're starting to have an increase in the number of documents that they need looked over. As people get back to work, we're starting to see more non-competes, and as litigation or not potential litigation, as legal disputes get hashed out, we're starting to see more hold harmless agreements and things of that nature. And of course, we're seeing the classic documents that we've always seen, lease agreements, warranty reviews, things of that nature. We've been seeing an increase in those types of things uploaded through our portal. And we're seeing a lot more portal usage through our website than we are old-fashioned mail, which makes sense as people get stuck at home. Even folks, this last spring and summer that might not be internet savvy, such as myself, or might not be technologically savvy, we've gotten better at it just by default. Some of us because we've had to. We've also seen a significant number of our letters have gone out, and I wanted to share these. You can call them success stories if you want, but I want to use them as an example of how the letters work and sort of a sharp distinction between them in terms of what you're getting for your money, and not just in terms of recovery. We had one, let me find these. Here we are. We had one not too long ago where we had a member who had a small business plan that was doing landscaping work, and they got hired by a strip mall to do some landscaping. The problem was that the strip mall's irrigation system, which they promised in their contract would be, functional and working fine, wasn't working at all. And also there was the member couldn't, between that and some other drainage related issues, the member couldn't get anything to take. His business couldn't get anything to grow, even though it was really the strip malls, I don't say their fault, but they misrepresented their sprinkling system. And then so the grass wouldn't grow. And then what the mall did was they just terminated the contract entirely. They didn't give notice like they were supposed to. They didn't they just violated the terms of the agreement. So through the force of a demand letter, we got they agreed to release $8,166 in unpaid services to the member's business. $8,166 is a significant amount. And you think, oh, that's okay, that's great. That's the power of a demand letter. But here's another one. We had one, here we are. A member used a service to send emails on behalf of another small business. This one was one of those small business writers. I think it was just them by themselves. The member decided to try a different service, but it wasn't as effective. They then tried to cancel the new service, and they were told they couldn't. And we got them out of it with the demand letter, but we also got a refund of $250. Now, the reason that I'm using that example is because it illustrates a point that I've made a lot over the course of my speeches, and it's one that I want to make again. Sorry, I'm just checking for time, making sure I'm still good. We, as lawyers, we have to keep timers going so we know exactly how long we can talk. Judges don't like it when we ramble. But the point is $250 might not seem like a lot of money, but it was a lot of money to this member. And B, if I were a solo practitioner out on the street and I had my own shingle out front and I had my own office, and this member came to me and said, I have a $250 problem. As nice a person as I am, I'd have to tell him, look, I'm sorry, but it's going to cost you more than $250 of my time to handle your $250 problem. And whether it's $250 or $500 or $1,000 or $5,000, especially in that $1,000 to $5,000 range, or even higher in some cases, even this $8,000 problem, to a high billing attorney who bills $400, $500 plus an hour, that $8,000 problem isn't worth their time. And that's how law firms traditionally have operated. That's how the old law firm Shannon Gracie used to operate that Big Ross worked for back in the 1980s. They service, lawyers tend to service either the very wealthy or the very poor. It's always that in between, because either A, their clients are very wealthy and can afford to pay their extensive billing, their expensive billing costs and their hourly billing, and they can hire baby lawyers to come in and do all the work, pay the baby lawyers what amounts to a relatively small amount of money for the work that they're doing, and reap in all the profits. Or They're lawyers that work for the government, or they work for, legal. They do some pro bono work, but a lot of them do, legal work. For example, if you're on the wheel in Tarrant County doing criminal work for indigent defendants, you're not going to get paid a ton of money, but you're going to get paid. But you're getting paid by the state to provide legal services to the very poor. And there's a huge gulf of everybody else in between that you're just expected, well, go hire your own lawyer. And when we bill 200, 300, 400, $500 an hour, that can be very expensive, and it cuts a lot of folks out. And that's kind of one of the reasons why our firm exists and why the plan exists, is to provide legal services to those people. And that's pretty much everybody who's not very rich or very poor. Now, one thing that I was going to mention, speaking of attorney billing, and this is kind of a side note, when I say attorneys have broad range to bill, you could go, if you were looking for an attorney to hire and you had to pay them an hourly rate, and this applies for the 25% discount to show the type of savings that you would receive, or the paid for benefits, such as the consultation, the wills, the document reviews, the civil litigation defense. If you go to and when I say bargain basement, I don't mean cheap, like bad attorney, but an attorney with a good conscience who maybe sets up shop and charges a low rate, they may still bill $200 an hour, $180, $200 an hour. And that's dirt cheap by attorney standards. If you go to Dallas, you probably will have a hard time finding an attorney that bills under $250 an hour. And a lot of them are $300 to $400 an hour. Same thing with Houston. And it's commensurate with experience. If I've been practicing a long time, or if you're board certified, or if you practice a particular area of law that not a lot of people do, say like intellectual property work, something like that, you can get away with billing more. And you can bill those clients, and you're only going to go after clients that can afford to pay you. And that's one of the values of this service. Now, that's kind of benefit one, except for a couple of other things I want to talk about. Uncontested divorce, name change, and adoption. Our uncontested divorce benefits have actually remained surprisingly steady, except for we had a sharp incline early on as people were, not so much during the lockdown, because the courts were shut down and they weren't functioning very efficiently, if at all. And they're still not functioning in a lot of cases, except for to have certain types of hearings. Jury trials have been on hold because you can't realistically, other states have tried to have jury trials via Zoom, but I don't see how you could do it. If I'm a juror, who's to say I'm not being, or if I'm a witness, who's to say I'm not being coached by an attorney in the next room? Who's to say I'm not getting texts on my phone on how to answer questions? If I'm a juror, who's to say that I'm not receiving outside influence from somewhere else? So, but that's a tangent. But back to what I was saying, we saw a spike in divorces from folks, unfortunately, that were cooped up together, but not all of those were uncontested. But we have seen a significant increase in uncontested divorces where the packets have been coming in. Name changes and adoptions have remained pretty standard. If anything, they've gone down a little bit, but not much. But we have seen an increase in those. And remember, there's a 90-day wait if you have the uncontested divorce benefit. Part of that is the state of Texas requiring a minimum of 60-day residency. But the reason why we settled on 90 days is so that at Ross and Matthews, at the very least, if somebody buys the plan just to get the divorce and then quits, which unfortunately does happen from time to time, at the very least, we can recoup at least a little bit of our expenses. We're not going to get all of our money back, but we'll at least get a little bit of it back. But that uncontested divorce, if you were to go to my law office of Brian Ross and come and hire me, I could easily charge you $1,000 to do it. And that's dirt cheap. And that's if everybody agrees to everything. And if everybody agrees, returns in the packets, and we do the prove up and the paperwork, and we show up in court and do the prove up in court, and the prove up takes half a day on average, assuming that it's uncontested and there's no issues, you could easily run $1,000+ in some cases. Now, on to wills. I wanted to kind of save this for the last benefit one, because we have seen a huge spike in wills. And here it is. just to kind of give you, and you don't have to write these numbers down. This is just for a mental picture for you as an associate. Thursday, I don't have Friday statistics, but Thursday, in just one day, we had 26 wills to be drafted, which means the legal assistants were drafting 26 wills off of will questions. We had 43 wills that were prepared that attorneys were looking over, making sure that they were drafted properly and that they matched the disposition in the questionnaire. We had 8 where we needed additional information, where we were trying to get a hold of the member to get something clarified before we could finish them. And then we had 21 that were looked over by the attorney already from yesterday that were sitting there ready to be mailed out that day. And then that very day, we mailed out 26 additional wills that were done previously. We got in 12 more questionnaires. And then we also processed in between the to be drafted and in attorney review, we had processed 25 additional questions. Our will department has been running at a breakneck speed. Our services have been running by and large at a breakneck speed, especially in certain departments, but the will department is one of them. And the reason I say this is if you get your will questionnaire submitted to us and it's been a week or so and you haven't heard from us, call us. It's not so much that things are slipping through the cracks because we're getting better at doing things virtually, but just to make sure, just say, hey, just to be sure, did y'all get my questionnaire? You know, we'll get back with you. We were emailing the wills and sending the originals. There's been execution wise. Earlier there was a sort of there was an order that Governor Abbott signed, or that Abbott signed, which allowed for wills to be executed virtually. But that's kind of going away because now social distancing is becoming the new norm. We're going back to old-fashioned signatures, which, quite frankly, you want the will process to be as streamlined, or not streamlined. You want it to be as solid as possible, so that way there's no questioning it. Because when you have a will, if you get your will done, if let's say you don't get your will done, and I'm an heir, potential heir, and I want to fight how you wanted your estate distributed, I can put up a huge fight, assuming that you have a poorly drafted will. Maybe you wrote it yourself and you just didn't understand, how the ramifications of writing your own will, or maybe you got a form will off of some generic service company and you filled it out. It makes it a lot easier for me to attack that will. However, if you have a properly executed, attested will that's properly notarized with a self-proving affidavit and witnessed in the proper way, now all of a sudden attacking that will, my window becomes that much smaller, because all I can really do, the judge is going to say, well, the will's valid. That's what the testate or testatrix wanted. That's the distribution. That's the way it's supposed to be. And then all I can do, if I'm still trying to fight it, is say, well, maybe they weren't of sound mind, or maybe they were under duress. There was some legal reason why that will shouldn't be valid. But I attack what's in it, because what's in it is done, admitted to probate, it's over. So we've seen a huge spike in wills, and that makes sense because, quite frankly, during this pandemic, even though we're kind of getting back to normal, we're getting better at treating COVID, the fear is still there. And especially earlier on, but throughout this entire pandemic, it's got people thinking about their mortality. So we're seeing a lot of members turning in their wills, which is a good thing, because a lot of times the Home Office talks about wills equaling persistency and memberships on the books. I certainly hope that's the case, because I anticipate, I can't say this for certain and I could be wrong, but I anticipate that, we normally average around just under 6,000 wills a year. I wouldn't be surprised if we broke 7,000, which might very well be a record for us, although we'll have to wait for the end of the year for those statistics to pan out. Let me check time real quick. 24 minutes, all right. Traffic tickets. Okay. Speaking of upticks in usage, it's funny because there's been an uptick and a slowdown, and here's what I mean. As people have gotten back out on the roads, you have all these cities and municipalities, you have all these counties that have sheriff's deputies or constables, or not usually constables, usually it's the sheriff's deputies. They're out for the JP courts. they're out writing tickets. They're back to business as usual. And if anything, they're kind of going even faster, writing even more tickets because they're trying to catch up from all that lost revenue from tickets. Uh, and if you live in large metropolitan areas, you've probably seen this. You may start to see more cops on the road depending on where you're at. It's kind of getting back to normal. Now, the processing of the courts disposing of the tickets is taking longer, or they're just now getting back to normal because obviously trials are much more difficult to hold or impossible in some cases. Those are still on hold. A lot of the courts have had to set up to where they either have social distancing and they're opening back up. A lot of the smaller courts may be opening back up, but a lot of them are still running virtually, or they're just putting everything on hold. So if you have a ticket, it may be in limbo. And now the reason I'm telling you this is because if you get a ticket for cover, you submit it, and let's say it's covered, and we send a rep letter off, the court, if they've got their stuff together, we might get an offer for a deferral from the court and have it to you within the normal time frame. But at the same time, it might be months or months before the court gets their stuff together, in which case they've just got the ticket on hold. And if they do, and this is a tip, if you have the plan or if you sell it to somebody, remind them, if you have a ticket with us or any other attorney, if you ever have a ticket attorney, since tickets take a long time to process for the courts to set them, if you change your address or your phone number, let us know. Because what can happen is you send a ticket off to, let's say, my office, and you live in Houston Municipal. And let's just say, or you live in the city of Houston. And let's say that ticket takes 6 months before it goes to court and you move. I don't know that. I send you a letter. I try to call you saying, hey, you got court on this day. I have no way of letting you know. Court date comes and goes. Assuming, this is in the old days, but even with virtual court, if you've got to be present in some capacity, you miss it, that could be a problem. And as courts get back to normal and start opening their doors via social distancing, or especially post-vaccine, and I'll get to that in a little bit, talking about anticipation in the future. But we're seeing a large number of tickets. The process is still the same. You still send them via the uploader. Nothing in that regard has changed. What's changed is our dealing with the courts. So just kind of keep that in mind. B3 litigation, lawsuits. Right now, because of the eviction moratoriums in place, and because of a lot of the CARES Act and a lot of the other sort of temporary stopgaps that have been put in place, there's not a huge number of lawsuits, although there's a fair amount of them coming in. But what I anticipate is in the future, what we're seeing a lot more of what I see ahead of time as potentially being lawsuits in the future in the next year or 2 years. And that's where people are getting threatened over debt that they can't pay because they lost their jobs, credit cards. They're starting to get those nasty letters from the credit card company saying, hey, we noticed you haven't paid your credit card lately. Here's a friendly reminder, your minimum balance has gone up. That's the precursor to the slippery slope, which is I've seen it a million times over. You can't pay the debts. The original debtors hound you. Then they turn it over to collection agency. The collection agency starts poking at you. After a while, the collection agency then hands it back to the original debtor or the original creditor and says, well, sorry. Then the creditor, maybe they sue on it. Maybe they turn it over to a third-party debt purchaser. Then the third-party debt purchaser hires a collection agency. Then they start harassing you. Then ultimately they file suit and try to collect on a default judgment, anticipating that you won't show up in court. That's how they make their money. And I have no way of knowing this. This is just me talking off the top of my head. I don't have the statistics to prove it, but my gut tells me that in the next couple of years, we're going to see a wave of those types of suits. The more immediate issue is going to be whenever eviction protection ends, landlords start kicking tenants out. And in some cases, it's already happened. Now, remember, regardless of what the law says, there's nothing to stop a landlord from going to the Justice of the Peace and filing an eviction suit. And there's nothing stopping it's not like federal agents are going to swoop in and stop a local Justice of the Peace in Texas for going ahead and setting the hearing. Different courts are handling it differently, but there may be a wave of those in the future. We'll just have to see how those play out. And the reason that there's one other thing that I wanted to bring up trend wise, and that is usage. We have been just slammed with usage. And we anticipated it to a certain degree. We knew it would be coming, and we did our best to shore up for it. But, just yesterday, or no, I'm sorry, Thursday, the 22nd of October, we had 937 calls. That used to be a relatively busy day for us. And that is the first time that I've seen a number below 1,000 in over a month. We've seen as many as 1,300 calls a day. We've topped on some Mondays as much as 1,500 calls a day. And it is created a backlog that we are doing our pardon my language, that we're doing our damnedest to fight through. And one of the ways that I'm countering that, and it's going to take a little time because I'm still training them, I'm still getting them set up. But if you're calling in, you may be talking to new attorneys that you've never heard of, especially if you've been a long time associate. And that's because I'm hiring them as fast as I can get them in the door. One, two, three. I'm going to count. I'm not going to count that one because he decided he only worked here for a little while. Four, 5, 6. That one we didn't hire. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Point is, we have just been hiring attorneys as fast as we can get them in the door. And COVID has changed how we've, in that regard, our attorneys have fluctuated because some of our attorneys have retired. Some of our older attorneys just decided, 2020 is a bad year. I'm just going to go ahead and just hop in my RV and go tour the country. And I wish them all the wellness in the world, but we're hiring to replace and to buttress our calls as fast as we can. Now, the good news is that once the ship kind of ballasts out, we'll have an overabundance of attorneys, which will actually benefit us and you in the long run. But I just bring that up just just to be be patient with us. We're also, one other thing that we're seeing is, and this isn't so much from associate driven. I don't know that this is associate driven sales. It may be more D2C, maybe not sure. Don't quote me on that. But we're seeing a lot more. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot more people call in with existing legal problems, actual legal problems, and that a lot of that's pandemic related. That can't be helped. But the plans that usually sell the best are the ones where people buy it going, oh, this looks like notwithstanding associates who buy it to market, that's better than fine. We love that. But if it's one of those things where we get a lot of, if we get people who buy the plan because they think, oh, that's a good idea, this might be useful in the future, and they keep it in mind, they're the members that tend to be the happiest versus I just got served, with a demand letter, or I not served, I just received a demand letter via certified mail. And, what am I going to do? We can, in some cases, work miracles, but that's a lot harder to do. Sometimes if somebody calls in with an existing legal problem and they're deep in it, all I can do is give them a laundry list of, here's option A, B, C, D, E. They're all bad. Let's figure out which one is the least bad for you. And that's unfortunately, we see a certain increase in that, and there's nothing to be done for that. We just deal with it as best as we can, and we have to remember to keep our bedside manner. Our MR department has been unfortunately busy, but that's okay. That's why they exist. That's why they're there. That's why we need to know. We're still offering second opinions. We're still offering. If you talk with an attorney and you have a consultation and you didn't like the way it goes, let us know. Be patient with us, but we'll try to get you with another one of our attorneys to offer a second opinion. And sometimes it's not bedside manner. Sometimes if you've got a bad legal situation, even if I let you down as nicely as I can, it's still going to leave a bad taste in your mouth. But sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes attorney A you talk to, and there was one I did not too long ago where I called a member back. And after I spoke with them, I didn't tell them anything that the original attorney didn't tell them. Nothing. I from a legal perspective, I agreed with the first attorney's consultation point by point, line by line. But when I got off the phone, the member was actually happy. And I think it's because they knew that the situation wasn't that great that they were in, but they at least wanted someone to understand where they were coming from and share their pain. And even if they didn't necessarily have, even though I didn't necessarily have great news for them, at the very least, I was able to understand where they were coming from. Now, from the other thing that I've noticed is, from a pandemic perspective, now that we're doing a lot more of the stuff virtually, I think people are becoming to a certain extent more comfortable with it. It's really kind of hurt my it's from a certain perspective, it's been difficult for me because I'm getting better at doing things virtually. But in the old days, when I would go out and hit the pavement and do speeches and do web seminars and things of that nature, I really prefer doing those in person because it's a lot easier to reach out to people. But it is what it is, and that's okay. We all make adjustments. We all deal with things as best as we can. I know that from my understanding that Charlotte was virtual. We were supposed to all go to Charlotte. We were told at the last minute, obviously that's a no-go, but they did it virtually. And I hope it went well, and I hope y'all, got a lot out of it because obviously the business model hasn't changed. If you're happy, we're happy, and that's why we exist, is to try to make our members as happy as we can. Now, that being said, I'm coming up on 40 minutes, and we were told we have about 45, but I imagine you all have a super busy day, so I'm going to turn it over to Daniel at this point. Once again, thank you so much for having me on. I do appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ross. I know I got a whole couple pages of